Hello, it's Dawn Michelle from Boho Tarot, and today I thought we'd take a look at the new Literary Witches Oracle, which is a deck that just came out recently, and I thought we'd take a look at it in comparison to the book that was published earlier. So this book was actually released several years ago in, I believe it says 2017. Yep, first edition, October 2017. Now, I've had this book for quite some time, probably at least a year, I want to say. And it's a beautiful book, and it's one of the reasons I really loved it was because I loved the illustrations in it. So I was really excited when I found out that there was going to be an oracle made based on the illustrations and the information in this book. So there's a lot of walkthroughs of this deck online. Kelly from The Truth and Story did a really wonderful one. I will try to remember to link that below because that was, as always, she did a beautiful job really diving deep into the cards. So I kind of don't want to reinvent the wheel where that's concerned. So what I thought we would do today is really just take a look and compare the deck, the little guidebook that came with the deck, and the actual book that was previously published. Now, I do believe that this oracle works just fine as an oracle using the information in the guidebook that's been provided here, but there is a whole another world that is available to you if you pair it with the actual Literary Witches book. So that was kind of my thought for today. I thought we'd just kind of have a little play with them and see how they all work together. So one of the things that this deck does have is it has kind of two different types of cards. So we have the author cards here, which are these gorgeous illustrations. It's on this wonderful linen cardstock, and it's a nice big oracle size. So there are, I believe, 30 author cards that we can see here with these gorgeous illustrations, and we'll take a look at each of them when we compare them to what we've got going on in the book. And then it also has these 40 Lenormand type cards. And I actually quite like these cards. I think they're really pretty. I think they're really beautiful, actually. And one of the things that I am planning on doing is to do some modifications to this deck, which I'll do another video on. But you can see they're just very simple, very minimalistic illustrated images, and we have it's on this nice light background here. They do actually go quite well with the cards, even though I thought maybe there was going to be some discrepancy in the deck between having these lighter, more simple designed cards with these beautiful illustrations, but it actually works quite well. I actually use it in a different way, which is something we'll talk about more when I go into the actual mod of this deck. So for right now, we have these gorgeous cards, but we're not going to really contend with these in this video. I'll talk about these more in my deck mod video. So I'm going to set these aside for right now. And we're just really going to focus on these cards right here. So the book itself is just, it's absolutely gorgeous. And, it has gorgeous illustrations in it. It's very well written, and for each author you have a title page, you have a kind of keyword description about them, and then their birth date and the date that they passed. And then we have these gorgeous full color illustrations of the deck, and then we have kind of more keywords and a beautiful little like Kelly had mentioned in her video, this sort of poetic story about them, a little bit of more information about the author, which I believe is what is on the cards, and then a recommended reading list. So those things that you may know them for, or things that you might want to read. So we have that for each of the authors. So what I'm going to do to start with is I'm going to go ahead and pause and put these in order as according to the book, because I probably should have already done that. And then we'll take a look at the book, the guidebook, and the cards as all together. So we begin with Emily Bronte, who it says is a reclusive British novelist from 1818 to 1848. So you can see here in the book, like I pointed out, we have this beautiful full color image of the card, which is really great. The keyword on the card is fantasy, and up here we have sort of this keyword that is Watchers of the Moors, fantasy, and cruel romance. So we have this lovely poetic prose here, and in the beginning, these unfortunately, well, fortunately, unfortunately, I'm not sure exactly, I'm not sure whether it's a good or a bad thing, but these are actually in a different order than they are in the book. So they are in alphabetical order by last name in the book, which is nice, but in this book, they are just seem to be in the book. I'm not sure exactly what the ordering was. I can't remember if it had mentioned it. Anyway, it's a different order in this book. So, but this book has a table of contents, so you can quickly look up an author if you wanted to use this in lieu of the guidebook. And here there is no table of contents, but they are in order, in alphabetical order. So it's a very small guidebook. So here's the section on the witches. Actually, this is the section on the witches, I should say. So it's quite easy to find what you're looking for in here because it's not very big. So we will go to Emily Bronte. So her keyword is fantasy, and it's dwelling, indulging, hiding in fantasy. So this little description down here is the same basically as the one you see here. Let's just go ahead and give each one of them a read so we can see. So in the guidebook, it says Emily Bronte, 1818 to 1848, spent her uneventful life at the family home on the moors. She created fantasy worlds with her brilliant sister, Charlotte and Anne, brushed the carpet, and took walks in the hills. After her death of tuberculosis at the age of 30, she archived posthumous fame for Wuthering Heights, a vicious novel of romance between two isolated stormy characters, Catherine and Heathcliff. So this description in here is exactly the same as the one that I've read from here. The one thing that the book does have is this beautiful poetic introduction for each of the characters, and I think that there's a lot that you can pull out of that because it talks a lot. There's a lot of symbology in this description here. So let me just go ahead and read this one to you for Emily Bronte so we can get a feel for how those go. When she brushes the carpet, Emily imagines she is smothering the moors for Heathcliff's perfect feet. He'll come in, Emily dreams, like the winds she walks against, muscular gusts, clenched hands snarling under her coats. What do the ants whisper to Emily as they climb the ruined trees outside? She puts her ear to the bark and listens. She will join their palace. She will be their ant queen. She will pit them against other ant queendoms. She will watch their love and war play out. Emily makes a telescope from ice and twine. Through this tunnel, she stares into her own eye until she sees a galaxy, and through the galaxy until she sees a stranger's eye. So there is a lot of symbology that we can pick up on in this writing that we do see reflected here in the card. We see this telescope of ice and twine made here. We see the ants marching in. We see the ruined trees here. And I think there's just a lot that you can really pick up on between this little bit here and, of course, this information here. So as far as this goes, I don't feel that this is really much in the way of a divinatory or oracle type message. That really is just coming from your keyword here, your main keyword, and then your little key phrases down at the bottom. That's really the only type of divinatory message that you can kind of glean from these cards in this particular guidebook. Now, while I don't think that we necessarily need all of this to work with an oracle, and in fact, I very rarely use the books with my oracle most of the time, this one is a little bit different because these are real people. And while it is a little bit fantasized, I think obviously these women, most of them probably were not actual witches and did not identify as a witch, because for most of them, they would have been burned at the stake had they done that in their time. So there is a little bit of fantasy to this deck as a whole anyway, but I think adding these beautiful symbolic touches and these key phrases that you can pick out, I think are a lot more helpful to doing sort of divinatory or oracle type readings with this deck. It kind of gives you an energy to tap into when you pull the Emily Bronte card. Yes, you have the keyword of fantasy here, but I feel that just all of this, you know, we tap into that energy of you know, Heathcliff coming in. We tap into the energy of the ants marching along. We tap into that energy of the ice and twine telescope here, which had I not read this, I wouldn't have realized that that's what that was. And I wouldn't have realized the significance of the tree, of the ants. So I think that it's almost kind of a little bit of a shame that the book is not, doesn't have a bit more of this symbology mentioned in it. But I think Kelly said in her video too that perhaps they knew that the majority of the people who were going to purchase this deck probably already had this book, because if you're interested in literary writers, particularly women literary writers, then this is probably a book that you would have been drawn to. But perhaps you had never seen this book, because I hadn't seen it at all anywhere prior to purchasing it. And I just happened to walk by a shelf that this was forward facing on at Powell's. So up until that point, I'd never seen any mention of it, and I really hadn't seen any mention of it afterwards. So I don't think that it's something that, at least in our community, that was very widely publicized, because it's a book about literary authors, even though it does have that sort of fantastical, you know, literary witches angle to it. I think that in our particular community, a lot of people probably don't have this book. I do highly recommend it. It's a gorgeous book. It's very beautifully produced and it's very well written. But I think that there's a little bit of a disservice done to the deck that it doesn't include more of that in this book. However, this book is usually quite affordable, and a lot of times we have to buy those expanded guidebooks for our decks. So I kind of just view this one in that sense now, that this is sort of an expanded guidebook for this deck. And I think you can really see those beautiful key symbols being picked out in that information. So here we have Octavia Butler, so science fiction writer, 1947 to 2006. So here for Octavia Butler, we have the keyword of the future on the card. And here we have sower of strange seeds, species, and the future. So we have for Octavia Butler, we have the future, we have imagining, planning, worrying about the future. So next we have Shirley Jackson, which was an American horror writer, 1916 to 1965. So here for Shirley Jackson, again, we have the same message that we have in the guidebook. Keyword is fantasy, and it's domestic pleasures, domestic horrors, partnerships, and children. So that, again, that works really well for, you know, a horror writer. So our keyword at the top here is Witch of Villages, Domestic Horrors and Omens. So that ties in a little bit to the keywords that we saw in the guidebook, but there's so much more that goes on in this card. So next we have Eileen Chang, Giant of Modern Chinese Literature, 1920 to 1995. So here we have the Enchantress of Bitter Love, Treachery, and Jewels. So the keyword here is fate, and it's outside forces, events falling into place, and acceptance. So here we have Sylvia Plath, iconic confessional poet, 1932 to 1963. She, of course, had a very short life. So her keywords here are fury of motherhood, marriage, and the moon. Her keywords in the book are living in the dark, intensity, and fury. So here we have Toni Morrison, Nobel Prize winning novelist, 1931. So her keyword in the book is Queen of Miracles, Generations, and Memory. See how much more expansive that key phrase is? I just really like these little key phrases in here because I think that they're really great for tapping into for the energy of the card. Not that the keyword here, power, does not work beautifully for Toni Morrison, because it quite does. Here we have owning power, seizing power, the powers at play. So really tapping into that power idea there. And this is the point where I start slaughtering names, and I do apologize. So Anna, and I'm not even going to try to pronounce her last name because I will slaughter it. She was a great Russian poet, and from 1889 to 1966. So our keyword here is Coldania of Winter, Endurance, and Willows. I may have slaughtered that as well. And her keyword here is endurance. She is staying with pain, avoiding pain, and patience. So next we have Joy Harjo, and she is a poet and musician born in 1951. So her key phrase up here is cosmic traveler of crows, horses, and survival. And this is what we see here in the card. We definitely see the horses represented there, and I think that's really great. She is plugging in, making decisions, and fear. So that's quite the range of key phrases there for her. So here we have Flannery O'Connor, author of Southern Gothic fiction, 1925 to 1964. So her keywords here are seer of peacocks, weird country people, and glass eyes. How fabulous is that? Is that not the weirdest key phrase you've heard? It's pretty close to the weirdest key phrase I think I've ever heard, but I really like it. I think it's pretty cool. So her keyword here is humanity, and her key phrases are who we are, reckoning with failure, and redemption. So those are really interesting. So here it talks about, there is a chicken card in this deck, which I think is pretty funny, but it talks about the couple of different birds that we see here. It says, on her deathbed, Flannery learns the language of chickens. She squawks a song irresistible to her peacocks, and dozens fly in through the window. The peacocks serenade her with their tails, amuse her with their pretty talk. When Flannery loses all of her hair, they bite off their own feathers to crown her with a headdress. How beautiful is that? I mean, it's totally weird, but it's really pretty. And there is a chicken in this deck that actually kind of probably relates to this card. I believe there might even be a peacock as well, if I remember correctly, but we do see the peacock here on the card. So next we have Sappho, who's the lyric poet of ancient Greece, 630 to 750 BCE. So the key phrase here is the siren of lyre, honey, and ruins. And her keyword on the card is love, and her keywords here are the beloved, desire, taking flight. So that's really beautiful. Here we can see where it talks about Sappho as a pair of wings, purling between pigeon blue, moody emerald, and golden white, smoldering in a hidden cave. So we can clearly see that reflected on the card, which is really interesting. So again, those are all symbols and ideas and energies that you can pick up on in your readings. So here we have Fru, and I'm not going to try to pronounce her last name because, again, I will slaughter it, and I just really, really don't want to do that. So she was an Iranian poet and filmmaker, 1935 to 1967. So here for the keywords, we have rebel of sensual love, green gardens, and perfume. Keyword on her card is rebellion. Keywords here are independence, barriers, and isolation. So here we have Emily Dickinson. This is one of the greatest poets of all time, and she was very prolific, 1830 to 1886. So her keywords here are scepter of widows, flies, and the unexpected. She has the keyword of the soul, and it is spiritual life, the inner world, and the unknown. So here we have Audre Lorde, poet, essayist, civil rights activist, 1934 to 1992. So she is the warrior witch of otherness, bodies electric, and sisterhood. Her keywords on this card are justice. Her keywords in the guidebook are fighting for yourself, your values, your community. So here we have Angela Carter, who is a British author of fiction and fairy tales, 1940 to 1992. So her key phrase up here is fairy godmother of bloody tales, the circus, and mirrors. Is identity, and it's investigating identity, roles, who you are. So we've seen that who you are come up a couple of different times. So next we have Virginia Woolf, visionary British modernist, 1882 to 1941. In her keywords here, we have guardian of the waters, the porcelain, and the lexicon. We have developing a vision, innovation, and limitations. So here we have Sandra Cisneros, groundbreaking Mexican-American writer born in 1954. And this is in Spanish, so I cannot read it, and I'm not going to attempt to, but hopefully we are zoomed in close enough that you can read that one. So her keywords are joys of the body, sorrows of the body, and the senses. So next we have Charlotte Perkins Gilman, the American powerhouse of feminism, socialism, and fiction, 1860 to 1935. So we have the soothsayer of utopias, creeping women, and evil wallpaper. Again, that's just, oh, those are so good. They're so rich. So for Charlotte Perkins Gilman, we have freedom. With oppression, what frees you, and the systems at work. So here we have Jamaica Kincaid, Antiguan American author, born 1949. We have the Sorceress of Islands, Venom, and Histories. And her keywords in the book are lineage, the past, and deep time. Here we have Anne Carson, the Canadian poet and classicist, born in 1950. So we have the High Priestess of Scholars, Volcanoes, and Eros. How cool is that? She's the High Priestess. I really like that. Keyword is the intellect, and her key phrases are intellectual growth, delights of the mind, and plagues of the mind. So here we have Leslie Marmon Silko. She is a Uruguayan Pueblo novelist, born in 1948. So she is the storyteller of Rattlesnakes, Turquoise, and the Sacred Desert. And her key phrases here are taking care of each other, safety nets, and exile. So here we have Alondra Pizarnik. I probably slaughtered that too. Minimalist Argentine poet, 1936 to 1972. And her phrase in here is phantasm of silence, death, and lilacs. And here her key phrases are silence, interiority, and space. So next we have Mirabai. I, again, might have slaughtered that. The Hindu mystic and devotional love poet. It says 1450 to 1547, both with a question mark. So here her key phrase is Dankini of holy ecstasy, the dark one, and ankle bells. Devotion, and the keywords in the book are worship, passion, and the sublime. So next we have Anais Nin. I may have, again, I'm just going to keep apologizing for mispronouncing names because it's bound to happen. So it's the avant-garde author of fiction and memoir, 1903 to 1977. And her keyword or her key phrase in the book is undying of introspection, opulent dreams, and voyages. Her keywords are the subconscious, and it is the unexplored, submerging, surfacing. So next we have Gertrude Stein, a modernist innovator, 1874 to 1946. And in the book, her key phrase is Madam of Roses, Geometry, and Repetition. Her keyword here is perspective. And her keywords in the book are making sense, frames, and new ways of seeing. And next we have Yumiko, I'm not going to try to pronounce that, the Japanese Surrealist, 1935 to 2005. So she is the Sybil of masked extraterrestrial eggs and twisted fantasies. So her keyword on her card is transformation, masks, becoming, play. So next we have Agatha Christie, the best-selling British crime novelist, 1890 to 1976, and she is the grand dame of trickery, murder, and tea time. Her card is, of course, trickery, and the key phrases in the book is suspicion, deception, the missing piece. So next we have Janet Frame, a New Zealand novelist, 1924 to 2004, and she is the hermit of hospitals, belonging, and lost souls. So we had our high priestess and now we have our hermit. How wonderful is that? So her keyword on her card is belonging, and her key phrases are being at home, being a stranger, knowing yourself. So we definitely have the two sides, the light and the shadow, in these key phrases for most of these cards, which I do really appreciate. So here we have Maria Sabina, and she is the healer and oral poet, 1894 to 1995. And she is the shaman of dew, hummingbirds, and mushroom language. Again, I just love those. Card is healing. And her key phrase in the book is what ails you, seeking help, and helping others. So here we have Mary Shelley, who's the British author, as we know, of Frankenstein, 1797 to 1851. This is the alchemist of monsters, children, the living, and the dead. How perfect is that? Her key phrase is loss. Her phrases in the book are the cycle of life, transitions, and attachment. And finally, we have Zora Neale Hurston, the Harlem Renaissance star, folklorist, and anthropologist, 1891 to 1960. She is the conjurer of hurricanes, zombies, and tall tales. So her keyword on her card is story, And the key phrases are your story, the story of others, and listening. So that is all of our authors, having gone through this beautiful book here, which I think just really, like I said, really just draws a deeper level to these cards. I think whether or not you find this useful will probably depend on how you end up working with this deck. But I think that there's enough here in this little guidebook to help you sink into those messages and to make enough of a connection to these authors. But of course, you're just going to get so much more when you go to this bigger book. Let's just take again a quick flip through these cards. So one of the ways that I'm going to be using this deck is to use this portion of the deck separate, or to keep it separate from this portion of the deck. I will be using them together, but I will be using them kind of like I would a tarot and an oracle, or a Lenormand and an oracle. So that's kind of my plan for them. And like I said, that's going to be, I'm going to talk about these more in my mod video, because the mod that I'm going to do with this deck really does have to do with my intention to keep these two decks separate. But these are just absolutely gorgeous images. And again, I think that there's plenty with the keyword. It is an oracle, and a lot of times with oracle, I don't really need an extended message or an extended guidebook to really work with an oracle, because generally I can get enough of a hit off these keywords. But the way I intend to use these cards is that I will pull these for the energy of the reading, for a message from this author, and then use these cards to actually lay out that message. So being that that is my intention, and I will never have more than one of these authors in a single spread, having this book to really dive deeper into these particular authors and to tap into that energy of some of these, these key phrases here that we have, and some of these sort of poetic writings on the authors, I think really is just going to add a really beautiful, poetic, deeper layer to these messages. So that was just a look at the Literary Witches Oracle, but mostly a look at the author cards and the two different books. Like I said, this is the guidebook that comes with the deck, and this is the book that was published a couple years ago, and it is separate. So these two come together, and this one is on its own. But I do think I highly recommend this one, especially if you want to work with this deck, kind of like I had mentioned, of just pulling a single author card and then pulling the message from that. And I think it's going to be a really wonderful oracle, and I'm really excited to go ahead and do the modification on it so that I can work with it in the way that I'm planning to, because I am planning to work with this deck in a very specific way. So I hope that you enjoyed this look at the two different books, and of course focusing in on those author cards. Like I said, we'll take a look at the witches materials, I think is what they're called in this deck, those 40 separate cards in my deck mod video, because those tie more into what I'm going to be doing with that. So I hope that you enjoyed this video, and I look forward to seeing you again soon for more creative tarot for an inspired life.